in your experience as a player and as a broadcaster and leader, what do you see? How do we protect that intrinsic motivation?
I think
when we can find it.
Yeah. I think it's always important. And I notice this, like, even just in my work life now, outside of just being a broadcaster, it could be whether volunteering at school or, what may have it, but you have to find and remember the why. Why are you doing this? And make sure that the people around you understand and that you revisit that purpose. So I often feel like when you hear, coaches speak, they'll often remind the team of, why the journey started, what the greater good is, and how everyone has a role. So I feel like lacrosse, I had to revisit a few times. I mean, it wasn't just about the wins or losses. I love the process of getting better. So each year, and I feel like sometimes that had to be reminded to me, whether it was, my dad over Christmas break, and maybe he didn't see me practicing as hard, and just like, do you remember, in your season's going to start in a couple months. This is what you need to do, and just kind of refocusing. So I think even now, like, just why are you doing what you do? You chose to do it for a reason. You had that passion, but how do you get everyone on board to kind of remember what lit that initial fire?
Welcome to Pressure Tested, where we talk with athletes, founders, executives, coaches, and other high performers about the moments that challenge them most. The setbacks, the difficult decisions, unexpected pivots, and lessons learned when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. Because great leadership isn't built when everything goes according to plan. It's built when you're pressure tested. Let's dive in. Welcome to Pressure Tested. I'm Chris Steer, and alongside Amy Larkin, we have the great fortune of being able to sit down with leaders, founders, executive, athletes, other high performers, and just to find out more about what makes them tick, what they've learned, and what have they pulled through in that learning from tough situations, right? Because that's where the growth happens. It comes from hard situations. We are particularly excited about today because we have the wonderful and amazing Sheehan Stanwick Burch, and we're talking about adaptability. And the reason why Amy and I really framed this topic today is because in the age of AI, in the age of the velocity of change, adaptability is got to be the hallmark of an effective leader, right? Because things are always pivoting and they're always changing. And so the best leaders are the ones that can adapt, synthesize, pivot, right? Rethink in some cases, admit they're wrong in some cases, and redirect. So they don't avoid pressure. They actually seek it out. And that's one of the things we're going to be talking about today. Before we jump in with our esteemed guest, just a reminder to go to the Steer Lab. It is our online coaching platform that it gives leaders the opportunities to actually do the deliberate practice, right? You have to do the practice before it becomes a habit and a mindset. So the Steer Lab allows you to focus on the human skills like communication, emotional intelligence, adaptability, decision-making, under pressure conversations. These are all the things. So steer-lab.com. Please check it out. So diving into adaptability, we are really excited about this because we often talk about staying composed in the midst of pressure. Amy and I use a term called equanimity all the time, right? A calm and composed mind in the midst of challenge. Well, our guest today has done that on every level of her athletic and professional career. And she's reinvented herself. She, in fact, has adapted to change in a way that is just really remarkable. And it reminds us that adaptability is an absolute leadership asset. And so, Sheehan, we are super excited to have you today. So thank you again.
I am thrilled to be here.
So for formal introductions, that's right.
Get after it. Get after it.
I know. And I am certainly not going to do you justice at all, Sheehan, but we are so thrilled to welcome you. Just a few things for our audience. One of the most accomplished athletes in the history of women's lacrosse. 4-time All-American, National Hall of Fame inductee, and still, I believe, holds the record for the Georgetown University career record for goals and points. Following her playing career, she successfully reinvented herself as one of the leading voices in sport, serving as analyst for CBS Sports, ESPN, ESPNU, and the Big Ten Network. But beyond athletics and broadcasting, probably some of the things she's most proud of, which we'll let her share a little bit more, is being a mentor, a wife, and a mother of 4 young athletes. That I'm sure gives her unique perspective on adapting through different seasons of life and leadership. Sheehan, welcome to Pressure Tested.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that nice introduction. I'm glad I played a long time ago because the landscape now has totally changed.
Just a little, right? Just a little. Well, let's talk, and this is something that's near and dear to my heart. Let's start at the Georgetown piece of this, Sheehan. So here's what I find in the early, going in the way back machine here, which I love about your story, is that what we see in leaders is that they often choose the harder path, right? The harder path creates more of the opportunity. Amy and I say this all the time. Everything you want is on the other side of hard, right? So back when you were choosing a school as an accomplished high school player, what was it about that university, about your self-belief? Maybe it was even about what Kim Tortolani was sort of creating a vision for you, but that was a bold move. Take us back to choosing that path.
Yeah, I mean, Georgetown was an awesome institution that I knew about. My dad actually attended there. He did not play lacrosse growing up, but it was Kim Simons. And I think it comes down to the people that she was the head coach at the time. She was super young, and she had a way to connect that I wanted to be part of something. So she had a unbelievable career at Princeton. She won a national championship and told me at a camp, which is actually where I first got to meet her. So I was able to relate to her as someone that was a coach at the time at a camp locally in Baltimore. And she then played in the camper all-star game. So I got to play against her. So I knew what she was saying. She could also back it up because she still was super talented as a player, and her energy. There was just something about her that was the initial attraction to the school. But she shared that when she went to Princeton, they weren't in the top 10. And by her senior year, they won the national championship. And she wanted to bring that experience to Georgetown. And it was clear to me that there was no guarantee. Just because she said it didn't mean that was going to happen. And it wasn't just going to be because of me. They had a great foundation of players on the current team, and they knew that they needed to recruit more people. But it sold me into wanting to be part of something. There was a lot of other schools that I was looking at that were great universities, but they didn't necessarily need me. And I felt that I could really be a part of something. And I understood that may not end up being, winning that national championship trophy, but win or lose, I was going to be part of that story. And that just really kind of resonated with me. And I am so thrilled with the decision, even though we ended up losing the national championship game my senior year. So not a perfect ending, but I think a perfect choice. Yeah.
Well said, well framed. Thank you for that. And it is something that we continue to see. When you look at patterns of high performance, what we see as a commonality among high achieving leaders, Sheehan, in the professional context, in the organizational context, is that they have part of that story that you just shared as part of their own origin story, propelling them into their professional lives. And so the fact that you did the hard thing, you chose a path that wasn't laid out for you, is awesome. So I wanted to lead off with that question because that was such a good one. Aim?
Sheehan, one of the amazing parts of your story, I think, is that you're the oldest of 8 kids, right? I'm quite fascinated with large families, but you essentially modeled adaptability for your whole family. Growing up, did you feel that pressure? And how did it shape your leadership instincts early on?
People often ask about that, being the oldest. And I didn't really see it as pressure at the time. When I think back to it and now having my own 4 children, I can see that probably the oldest does feel pressure, and maybe you just don't understand that. I think it was more just trying to set the example, and whether that was, just being a good role model in the classroom, or just, helping around the house or whatever it is. But athletically, I think, it was more probably my actions that they were able to relate to more so than what I told them, because there's a 15-year age gap and there's pretty much a child every 2 years. So especially the younger kids, they probably don't remember much of me being in that household, but I'm sure they remember going to the games, just being part of those post-game conversations or after practice or hearing things. Because I think they understood kind of how cool it was to play at the higher levels and be part of some of the teams, and then also witness just the emotional relationships that we had with all the friends, that it was something that they wanted to be a part of. So I love being part of a family. I think they've given me a lot more than I gave them following their journey, but I never really took it as too much pressure.
Yeah.
Right.
When you mentioned family, and Amy, your question is such a good one. The family aspect, the sports aspect, these are things that are just so accessible from a learning perspective when you get into the organizational context. Because it's, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with teams, we're dealing with disagreement, we're dealing with love, we're dealing with challenge, like all these things. And I think having that incredible experience of being a part of a big family, as well as your athletic background, it really sets you up. And I think that's where I want to go next, which is, you had mentioned before that lacrosse gave you that bug more than any other sport, right? That desire just to dig in and do more work, maybe be willing to do more work than other sports. And in the professional context, we may refer to that as like intrinsic motivation, right? Just that thing that just gets you out and just love it. How can we identify that and protect that as leaders? Like now, and we're going to shift over to a big adaptability moment in your career in a minute, but in your experience as a player and as a broadcaster and leader, what do you see? How do we protect that intrinsic motivation when we can find it?
Yeah. I think it's always important. And I notice this, like, even just in my work life now, outside of just being a broadcaster. It could be whether volunteering at school or, what may have it, but you have to find and remember the why. Why are you doing this? And make sure that the people around you understand and that you revisit that purpose. So I often feel like when you hear, coaches speak, they'll often remind the team of, why the journey started, what the greater good is, and how everyone has a role. So I feel like lacrosse, I had to revisit a few times. I mean, it wasn't just about the wins or losses. I love the process of getting better. So each year, and I feel like sometimes that had to be reminded to me, whether it was, my dad over Christmas break and maybe he didn't see me practicing as hard and just like, do you remember, in your season's going to start in a couple of months. This is what you need to do, and just kind of refocusing. So I think even now, like, just why are you doing what you do? You chose to do it for a reason. You had that passion, but how do you get everyone on board to kind of remember what lit that initial fire?
Amy, I think we just got our soundbite for I could not have framed that or said that any better, Sheehan. I love that. And before Amy goes with the next question, can I just unpack that for a second? Because that was so rich. Yes. Because it really connects to what Amy and I do every day, which is helping teams, organizations, leaders advance their performance. But you said start with the why. And we often say start with the why, or take it back to the plan, right? What's the purpose? What's the objective behind this? What's our mission? What are the priorities? What are we doing? Give me the logic. Give me the why, because that often really drives trust as well. And then I'll just comment on love the process. I think that is just, the earlier in life you can understand that and unlock that, the more dangerous in a good way you can be as a leader, because it's all about that. It's not about the outcome; it's about the process. So, Sheehan, that was a highlight reel. That was a highlight reel answer. So, thank you for that.
Fantastic. Yes, I immediately wrote down revisit purpose, which I think Chris says at least 3 times a day. It's so important to reground yourself and go back to really, why you're motivated to begin with. And I think especially in young people today, they need to take that pause. So segueing into kind of the next part of your career, I I think we as leaders know that adaptability really gets tested when the circumstance or the landscape changes unexpectedly, or when a chapter comes to an end. You know, you've covered lacrosse as it's changed over the years, and it almost is somewhat unrecognizable today as it was when you were a player. As an analyst and as a career woman, you know, you have to adapt your framework constantly. You know, how do you keep your expertise current, and how do you stay sharp on a daily, weekly, and even minute by minute basis, frankly, given your line of work?
Yeah, I mean, I really take the preparation seriously, because that is what gives me confidence, is just making sure that I do feel prepared. A lot of people would say that I'm an extrovert, but I really am very shy. So it does. But if I feel prepared, then I have the confidence that I need. And I've grown into this, you know, the role and feeling comfortable in what I'm doing. But I think if I relied on playing 25 years ago, I would not still be in this business. You know, I still remember my playing days like they were yesterday. But as you said, this game has changed so drastically. So I've been fortunate. I am so grateful to be doing what I do. I understand that it could end at a moment. So I don't take it lightly that I get to cover a game or get to do what I do. And I know that I need to stay current. So I am, you know, trying to understand, one, the entire landscape, because I could have two games or two teams in a game, but I need to make sure that I understand what are their opponents doing? You know, what are the other conferences, to make sure that I can tell the viewer the whole story. So I feel like talking to players and coaches, and just trying to stay relevant, because the game has changed. And I do feel fortunate to having those 7 younger siblings that all played in college, that I was able to follow their career. So it was very authentic to me to grow with the game, because I grew with it as a fan. And then I had my own kids pretty much right in line with, they were watching my siblings play in college. So they were learning the game. So I knew how it was being taught. So I feel like I've been blessed with having kind of a firsthand education at my fingertips, just from my immediate family of learning what the game is. But I really understand that I may not have this position next year. And so that I need to make sure that I prepare and do my best, because playing 25 years ago is helpful, but it's not, I understand that that's not the relevant piece to my story.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, just watching you, you know, over the course of just this past season, really, I have loved, and I know we've exchanged a few text messages and messages online, but just even how really you're trying to adapt to the audience, right? And you, I can tell, are pushing yourself out of the box with some of the videos that, you know, you and your colleagues are doing, which is, you're having a ton of fun, but you're also realizing that your audience is receiving information differently. And so I just have even watched you in the past year adapt in a really fun way in terms of, you know, how do you get people excited about what's coming, and look like you guys are just really enjoying yourselves out there, and the love of the sport of lacrosse. So. And
it's funny you say that, because I have had a lot of fun doing these TikTok videos, and I'm working with people that are over 20 years younger than me. So this isn't, I am not going to become an Instagrammer, and I don't have a TikTok account, and that probably won't change, even if it could reach more people and help, you know, quote unquote, my own brand. However, it's a team job, you know, just like it was in the playing days, what I do now. And that's what they want to do and share the passion. And it's fun to be part of it. You kind of have to embrace everything. And they've taught me things that I had no idea, you know, about the game and life too. So that's the, I think, interesting piece of working with others.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by, like, going back to when you had to build a new muscle, when you went from being a confident All-American National Hall of Famer, right, into a brand new career, which was very much at a time when lacrosse was still getting swept up in the momentum of more eyeballs, more attention, more media. How did you build that muscle up? That was a big change. Like, it's not easy for most people to be able to go into a broadcasting career, right, with any kind of longevity. And you've been able to do that. But at that first shift, what were some of the things that you were most challenged by, Sheehan, in adapting to this career?
Well, I think it's just being open to other people's feedback. From the get-go, I was not a broadcasting major, so we had no experience in front of the television. I was a finance major, and obviously like the lacrosse piece was very helpful, but to be able to communicate that and just the different nuances of understanding how things work, whether it's live, a live event or pre-recorded. But I think I would say it's the one, like being curious and open to what people said. So I had to learn from the very beginning about, where am I supposed to look, how to pause, if I make a mistake, how to correct that on air, and just how to, kind of acknowledge it and move on and not dwell. I remember saying, the wrong team, I said the wrong team name that was playing on the field, thank goodness. So it wasn't a total error, but I knew it right away and corrected myself. But I was so bogged down with that. And my partner just looked at me and was like, just move on. That happens all the time. And you just say, check that. And you kind of move on to the next play. If you misspeak. So I think I'm taking that criticism or the critiquing points, just more like people giving you advice of, when I give you a countdown, when we're going to commercial, you need to stop talking when I get to, the number 2 countdown, to also staying authentic. I didn't want it to sound like a different person. And I don't like using, necessarily other people's words or their style. Like you have to take all the different points of advice and then just kind of make sure that it still fits into what you want to deliver to the world. Yeah,
no, that's such a great answer. Amy, can I do a follow-up here based on what Sheehan just said? So Sheehan, so not only did you have to pivot and adapt to a new career, and I love what you said, take good counsel, be curious, right? Next play, like those are wonderful leadership mantras that we like to hear. But then the medium constantly changed since you've been in it, right? You entered this world, this broadcasting world, before social media just took over. What have you seen as the most significant change from when you started broadcasting to now? And again, acknowledging that you were at the top of your profession, right? So what have you seen?
It's the access of information. I mean, it has been wild. Back when I first started, the box scores would still be online on Teams, but that's how you had to understand how a game went. And as you guys know, the box score doesn't tell everything. You could see turnovers or shots, but it doesn't tell the whole story. So it was very hard to kind of understand how the games are. And now there's so many, whether it's local newspapers or just just different college reporters, all their Instagram accounts. They tell the story. You get the player interviews. You can actually hear the voice and the sarcasm or whatever the quotes are, instead of just reading it on paper and you may not understand exactly what the message is supposed to be. So I think the stories and the ability for us to share those stories has gotten so much greater. Now it's not at the level of football, for instance, in terms of the access and some of the stories that we get to see, but it is like leaps and bounds better than 25 years ago, which has made my job a lot easier because you get a lot of more in-depth detail that's out there. The sports information directors, can share that. And then even the access to coaches. I mean, I feel like that is, we've always had coaches calls and done different things. I think the coaches understand the way the business works, and some are better than others, but understanding that they have an ability to sell their program. So just what they share can help and we can promote that. Yeah, no, it's pretty remarkable. I'm sure you reflect on that sometimes, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're doing it this way compared to what we did even maybe 10 years ago, much less 15 to 20. Amy?
Ever changing, which is a great segue to leading through change, right? And, helping others navigate that change. And throughout your life, Jan, you have worn a ton of different hats, right? Not just as an athlete and as a leader in your field, but also as a mother and a teammate, right? One of the things that I love that I've read about you is how much you really enjoy watching your own kids play. And I've seen you on the sidelines, right? But your ability to be able to switch your mindset and the context in which you're watching your kids play. I'd really love to hear you talk a little bit more about that particular skill, that particular muscle of what I think we find that a lot of leaders really struggle with is being able to turn that CEO hat off, right? That work brain off, to just be in the moment and be present with their kids or their family or whatever is really more personal to them. And I'd love to just understand really how you have been able to adapt in your own personal life to be able to switching it off and on.
It hasn't really been that hard for me personally, because I think I always viewed it as just completely separate. It's maybe the same game or, athletic event, but it's completely different requirements myself. So I always understood, different areas need a different version of myself. So when I'm watching the game and I have that analyst hat on, I am, really unbiased. And there was times where I had to call my siblings' games. And I really do feel like I'm trying to look at it from both sides when I'm watching that game, and also understanding the official piece of it. So to kind of figure out which lens and how to blend that and communicate it. And then when I watch my kids, other parents will they'll ask me questions that I could answer if I was working the game, but I am not focused on those aspects.
Right.
And my kids don't need another coach or an analyst. They need a mom when they get in the car.
That's right.
I probably am way harder on them in the car than I am to the kid that missed the shot when I'm doing a game, and, credit the goalie for a great save. So it is a completely different view than the kind of work mode and the mom mode. And I think just for leaders in general, they need to understand what those around them, what different people need at all. Sometimes you need to have a different type of energy or vibe and know when to turn it on and when to turn it off.
That's right.
That's
fantastic.
Powerful.
Knowing your team. Fantastic.
That's powerful. And I want to, before we get into our closing reflections here in another minute or so, Sheehan, I would love to, for many of the folks that end up watching this or talking about this topic with us in the normal course of our work with our clients, invariably we come down to this idea that mindset drives the bus, right? And so what I'm hearing from you is the ability to be a learner, not a knower, right? Hearing from you the adaptability, the taking good counsel, because at the end of the day, what do we want teams and leaders to be able to do? To deal with change positively. See change as opportunity, right? And see growth only happening through a level of difficulty. And I think that's really what we see separates leaders from others, is their willingness to lean into that. Do you find that there is something about your ability or things that you've seen even among others in your field or even in the game where they've really demonstrated that level of embracing the change and seeing the challenge as the opportunity for growth?
I mean, I think change can be hard for so many people, and different people. You have to understand that everyone's going to relate differently to change. Some people embrace it and some resist it. And as a leader, how do you manage that process? And it goes back to, I think, just understanding why. Why is the change? Why is the change happening? And getting back again to kind of the purpose, but understanding that if people feel part of it, part of the process for whatever that change needs to be, and they have a role and understand their role, that makes it a lot easier than if you're just being told you have to change, you have to do this, instead of reframing that of how that change or how you can adapt some of your processes to help that change instead of just reacting. So sometimes I feel like it can be a little bit of like fight or flight when change happens, and you just kind of try to figure out how to maybe survive it. But instead, how can you kind of use it and maybe change while still staying, true to yourself, but more adapting to that process.
Yeah. Love that. Amy, why don't you throw one more at our friend Sheehan here before we close out? I want to make sure we honor her time in joining us today.
Sure. Absolutely. Just a thought. I think that sometimes leaders, and I will also say parents, forget how important it is to allow working through change, right? It isn't easy. It is very hard, but how much resilience that builds in an individual. And, we've hit on so many different themes and frankly, past podcasts that Chris and I have done over the past 2 years. But that feedback is really important. And sometimes it's hard to hear and it's hard to give it, but it's definitely harder certainly for someone to receive. But sometimes it can be a big difference maker in your life and in your career. And again, I think that ability to receive the information, as you just said, right, and decide how you're going to react becomes part of that adaptability journey. So I really appreciate, your sharing that. If you could leave our listeners today with any last comments and one takeaway or lesson about really performing under pressure, and give them a nugget or two, what would that be?
I think it would go back to sometimes don't be so safe. So there's been times where I've had to challenge myself and, usually, brought an opportunity, whether that's emceeing an event or maybe hosting an event, sideline reporting, things that were kind of outside of my comfort zone. And I was nervous and there was a lot of nervous energy and I had to go and, kind of talk to some of some trusted voices to say, do you think I should do this? Do you think I can do this? And I leaned into it and did do those things. And that nervousness or hesitation led to bigger growth. And then going back to the principles we talked about, my first hosting event, I had no idea what to expect and try to do my research and talk, but try to prepare as best as possible. Rely on my faith that it's putting me in the right position. And if I worked as hard as I could, then, the results I was going to be happy with in the end. So I think just allowing yourself that opportunity to say yes to things and understanding that you can grow with it. And some of those biggest hesitations have been great opportunities that now I feel so thankful that I did embrace and say yes to.
Wow, that's powerful. That is so good. That is so good. Well, thank you, Sheehan. Sheehan Stanwick Burch. Just thank you so much for your insights, your counsel, your great work that you continue to bless us with. And I think one of the things for our listeners as we close out that we take away from Sheehan today is the best leaders don't panic, they pivot, right? They learn. They put deliberate practice behind the efforts to get better. And so adaptability is in fact that. It's not a single decision. It is a deliberate practice. And so we stay grounded under pressure. We can win under pressure. We can respond, as Amy said, with intention when we have that deliberate practice. So thank you again. What a wonderful time. And we're grateful to you, Sheehan. And thank you for joining us on Pressure Tested.
Thank you. It was so great to be with you.
Thanks for joining us on Pressure Tested. If today's conversation challenged your thinking, don't let it stop there. Join us in the Steer Lab, where leaders train like athletes to perform under pressure and lead like champions. And remember, we're all in permanent beta mode, always learning, never done growing. We'll see you next time.